If you're a Christian believer, I have no doubt you're interested in forging a strong faith. That's what we're looking at in this series, beginning in 7 seconds. Okay, there are a lot of factors involved in forging a strong faith, and we're going to begin today by looking at the idea that God made the mold for mankind. That is to say, we are made in His image. I want to go right now and I want to take a look at one of the key verses that talks about how we're made in His image, and that is in Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 through 28. And let me pick up reading there in verse 26. It says, "Then God said," this is part of the creation account, "Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock, and over all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created mankind in His own image. In the image of God He created them. Male and female He created them. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and rule over every living creature that moves along the ground." Well, this is just one of a number of passages that speak to us being made in the image of God. And I want to pause for a second right here to say I recognize that we are fallen creatures. What I read from Genesis chapter 1 was the way God created us initially. And then, by Genesis chapter 3, we have the account of Adam and Eve rebelling against God, introducing sin into the creation, and that we are all born with a sin nature, and we do all sin, and that is a thing that sets us at odds with God. And so next week, we're going to talk about what happened to human beings as a result of sin and the fall. And we'll also be talking, as we go forward, about what God did to set that right. But for today, I want to talk about the way we were created. What is our nature as human beings? Because if we can understand how we're made and what we're meant to be, that can give us good insight into what God wants for us and from us, His expectation. And so many teachers and preachers and theologians today are focusing in on what happened with the fall and what we're like in our fallen condition. And that's important. I mean, we do need to talk about that. But today, let's talk about what it means to be made in the image of God. So the image of God refers to the way man is designed, not something that he does. Okay? Being created in this manner enables man to fulfill the destiny that God has intended. In other words, God created us the way we are for a purpose. The image of God in us includes the powers of personality, which makes us capable of being self-aware, interacting with others, thinking, reflecting, reasoning, making moral judgments, and willfully making choices. So think about that for a second. God has been described as a personal being because He interacts with His creation, and especially human beings. Now, so while God is transcendent, that is, He is set apart from, He is different from the creation itself, He is also immanent in the sense that He is in it and active and involved. He is personal and can relate to us. We're made in that same way. That's part of the image of God stamped on us, that we have personality. So we're self-aware. We can interact with other people as well as God. We can think and ponder and use reason. We have a moral capacity. And as we'll get into this next week, that's not been lost, nor is our ability to make choices. So more on that next week. Well, there are some implications of what it means to be made in the image of God. And I want to go through a few of these with us just to think through how important it is that we have been made the way we are. So let's look together at these things. So first, mankind is created, but we have a special place within creation. And that may seem somewhat obvious to most people, but I really wanted to make a point of saying this, that, we are part of the creation. That's what we are. That's our nature, right? Unlike a lot of religions and philosophies that think that we're going to work our way to being God someday or being a God someday, or the idea that God is in everything, he's through everything, God is in the tree and God is in the bush and God is in the rock and, in some spiritual sense. No. God is not the creation. He's apart from the creation. Mankind is a created being. But as God is personal, we have a special relationship and a special place within creation, because after God made everything else, he made human beings and he made us in his image. That makes us very unique. And we should say we belong to God, right? This is not immediately obvious to people who aren't Christians. In fact, non-believers, atheists, skeptics, or people who just aren't particularly interested seem to spend their lives running from God or trying to keep God at least at arm's length away, and we've all probably done that at some point in our lives, because God does have some expectations. He's designed us for a purpose. He has plans for us. And when we want to go our own way and do our own thing and act as if we are independent and we don't need God or want God, we can lose sight of this. But we do belong to him. And our destiny of what God designed and intended for us to be will never be ultimately fulfilled until we recognize that we belong to God and we belong in a personal relationship with him. So let's look at another implication. Jesus exemplified the full image of God in man, and we should pattern ourselves after him. Now, I want to be very clear about this, right? There have been some philosophies in the past that said, well, Jesus was God, but didn't really become fully man because physical matter's evil. Well, Jesus did in fact become fully man. Jesus was also fully God. So God came to earth to dwell among us, to live a sinless, perfect life, and then to die on the cross for our sins and be resurrected again. The idea that Jesus could be both fully man and fully God at the same time is a big subject. It's a big issue to grasp, and I'll admit that. It's not an easy thing to grasp, and that goes beyond the scope of this lesson. If that's something that you want to hear more about, feel free to leave something about that in the comments. If I see some people are interested in that topic, I will be glad to add it to the agenda of things that we teach on in the future. But here's the deal. Jesus, when he was on earth, experienced everything that we experience as human beings. Temptation, he experienced it. Sorrow, he experienced it. Loss, he experienced it. Pain, he experienced it. So he exemplified what it is to be fully man in the sense of the image of God. And we can look at the pattern of how he lived. We can glean a lot from that and should pattern ourselves after it. Okay, so implications of being made in the image of God. Here, I thought I already sort of touched on this, but we experience our intended design only when we are properly related to and engaged with God. You can do a lot of things on your own without God in your life. As a matter of fact, the consequences of casting God aside and pushing God away, those consequences are not always automatically experienced here on this earth. And you can do a lot of things seemingly without consequence, without having God in your life. but you will never be what God designed you to be. You'll never accomplish all God intended for you to accomplish. You will never be able to really fulfill and satisfy the purpose for which God created you until you are properly related to Him and engaged relationally with Him as well. And part of forging your faith is to understand how God has made you and what it means to be made in the image of God and how important it is to be properly related and engaged with God. I'm just going to go for a second longer on this, but I see so many people who are struggling to figure out their purpose in this life, to figure out their place in this world, to make sense of everything that's going on in this world, because this is a tough world that we live in. And a lot of people scratch their heads and they struggle in these areas. Some people even end up struggling with depression or other issues. And I'm not saying that being properly related and engaged to God is going to remove all struggles from your life. But you really never will make sense of it without God in your life. It's critically important, because you're made in His image, that you experience in the design, that you live out the design He has intended. All right, let's move on. Made in the image of God has this implication that learning, like education, learning and work are both worthwhile endeavors. Some people mistakenly think that work was part of the curse that came as a result of the fall, as a result of the sin of Adam and Eve. And it is true that some forms of work became more toilsome and difficult as a result of the fall, and you can read about that in Genesis chapter 3. But you remember the verse, God gave mankind dominion over this world and everything else that He created. God gives us a capacity to work and to be productive and to make a difference and to contribute. And He's given us minds that can think and reason and rationalize, and we can learn and grow as human beings, as we have been, right? As we have been as a race. And part of the reason we're able to do that, to learn and to work, is because we're made in His image, and those things are especially worthwhile. Well, let me go on to this next one. Human beings have intrinsic value because we matter to God. Today, there's a lot of arguing about who matters and for what reason. There's a lot about bigotry and prejudice, and this group of lives matters, and does that group of lives matters, and all these different things. And we need to understand that you don't have value because of your race, because of your education, because of the size of your bank account or your house, or how many cars you have, or how many patents you've accumulated, or how much fame or notoriety, in the best sense, that you have achieved. Your value intrinsically is there because you matter to God. You were made in His image, designed for a relationship with Him, and you matter to Him. And we'll get into this more in coming weeks when we see that even despite our rebellion and sin, how God took extraordinary measures to make a provision to satisfy the punishment we deserve and to reconcile us to Him so we can have the relationship with Him that we were designed to have all along. You see, we matter to God. And related to this is that because all people bear the image of God, we should therefore all be treated with dignity, right? Now, I'm not saying we look the other way and pretend that sin isn't sin or that people aren't doing wrong things. There certainly is accountability when people do evil acts or break the law or do things that God didn't design. But there is no reason to mistreat people along the way for any of the kinds of things that divide us as a human race. None of those things are reason not to treat anyone and everyone with dignity, because you were made, and I was made, like everyone else, in the image of God. I hope that you can recognize just how important it is to understand how God made the mold. If you want to grow in your faith, if you want to forge a strong faith, then friends, the way you do that is to start out by understanding who you are and seeing yourself through God's eyes, made in His image. And then we can honestly deal with all of the other things that it takes to be made right with God as a result of our sin, to foster and nurture a relationship with Him where we get to know Him more intimately, where we learn what it is to serve Him and to grow in our faith and to fulfill the destiny and purpose that God has for each one of us here. And this is going to be an exciting series. And I really hope that this idea of forging your faith is exciting to you, and that you will come back for some future topics. And oh, hey, you want to see those really cool graphics that we had for opening and launching this series? Let's take another quick look at those. All right, I want to thank you again for watching today. Please click the subscribe button if you haven't already, and the little bell icon will notify you of future posts. That'll help you follow along with this series, and check out the other resources we have here. If you've got some thoughts or questions, put them in the comments section, and by all means, please share this video on your social media with your friends and family. Thanks again for watching, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.